minute and kind of read through this. You probably heard that. We are recording the meeting just for those that can't participate. So just be aware of that in case you pick your nose or anything. As you read this slide, you'll notice there's some things underlined. And again, I kind of alluded to that already in my introduction, but really that leadership team, if you're beginning the designation process, that leadership team that shares the same passion you do as a school leader to really drive the work with the school for the kids, for the other staff. And then that plan we're going to talk about in just a minute. Those are really the key components to this. The training is going to be part of it. Your schedule is going to be part of it. But really making sure you've honed in on those other key leaders in the building that can support you will really help you really go through the whole designation process more than anything else, in my personal opinion. So the first attribute with infrastructure is going to be the STEM action and sustainability plan. And you can see that's basically a strategic plan. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the resources available on TSEN's website or not, but they've got a lot of really good, high quality resources there that can help you through this process and even help you beyond the process. I know Kristen's on here and she was just talking about tomorrow. They're going to be in about 12 different places with 4 people helping support schools through professional development and stuff. But the cool thing about that, if you've got a really high quality sustainability plan, it's going to carry you not just through the designation process, but actually through the longevity of your life as a STEM school. Again, for me personally, I'm really passionate. This is not just something we're checking off on a box. This is who we are now. I said earlier, we received designation in 2019. The next thing I did a month later after we received designation, I went to our school board with a plan and proposal to add STEM to our school name, to officially change the name to add the STEM acronym in there, because I want this to stay beyond me as the principal of the building. With the sustainability plan, there is a guide available on the TSEN website. It's an editable document. You can get in there. You can fill that out, work with your leadership team on that document. It's a guide. It'll help you kind of think through things you may not have thought about yet. I would highly encourage everybody to use that tool. Our school goes through this every year. Even though we've got designation, we go through this document, we revisit it. We look at how are we accomplishing goals, where do we need to modify goals. It becomes a living document, like your school improvement plan is supposed to be, right? We all have to do those things too. It's supposed to be a living document, not just something you put in a binder and put on the shelf. But part of our beginning of year activity is going through this document and working through it together. And it really helps as we have staff turnover, as we have changes in positions. It helps those new people that come on board really understand what an important part of our culture this work is. This rubric will kind of help you know, and this all again is available online, but looking at that attribute, the STEM action and sustainability plan, you can see the different phases. Your goal is going to be in the accomplishing or model. That's where you want to get to, but you can self-score yourself. You can work through with your leadership team. I would encourage you to go beyond your leadership team and maybe find collaborative time with every team or grade level, depending on how your school's made up, content area, whatever it might be, and talk about these things and maybe get every person in the building, including classified staff, to think through, if we think about an action plan, where are we? Are we in the early phase, the developing phase, accomplishing, or model? This is nice because the yellow words are really going to show you the differences, the basic to the detailed to the implemented plus for the model, right? So you've implemented this sustainability plan, but what have you done beyond that? I'm not going to read the slides to you. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence by doing that. I think, Kristen, are these all available after the fact?
The slides and the recording will be up for anyone to be able to access.
Yeah, so you'll always be able to go back and access this stuff, because I sometimes can talk fast, but again, I get excited about what I'm talking about. Evidence for a sustainability plan. This one I will talk to you about. You can see three forms of evidence: a fully formed STEM or STEAM leadership team, and we'll talk about that A word at the end that gets you to STEAM versus STEM. but a plan that's led stakeholders in a collaborative design process to create a detailed action plan grounded in research in which actions towards Tennessee STEM and STEAM attributes are outlined. So you have free autonomy to make that plan look in a way that's going to work for your team, that's going to make sense, but you've got to show how your team's leading the charge, right? The second piece of evidence there, the school provides evidence that a STEM or STEAM culture has been established. An example of that might be a consistent problem-solving method, engineering design process, scientific method, approaches used throughout the school. For us as a school, what we did there when we were working through this, we were really big. We had just finished a book study, Mitch Resnick's Lifelong Kindergarten. You're familiar with that book. But we were really passionate about that work. And so we actually modified some of the research that Dr. Resnick had done and created our own school-wide engineering design process. And so the way we can continue to collect evidence is that in kindergarten, I'm in elementary school, by the way, kindergarten, we start building that common vocabulary, that common language. It's going to carry the kids all the way through fourth grade. And a big part of that is how we work through the engineering design process. You know, when they're in kindergarten, it's a lot of foundational work, a lot of foundational skills being covered. So we don't expect them to be experts in STEM at the kindergarten level, but we do expect the teachers to start building that foundation with our STEM work, just like they would reading or math. A third evidence piece could be program leaders' quarterly communication of the action plan. Does it get participation and buy-in from school faculty and key stakeholders? So basically, when you think about evidence with all of these things, what I would encourage you to do is, as a leader in your building, whatever your position is, you wouldn't be participating in this if you're not having some voice in your school's progress towards this designation. I would really encourage you to start thinking about what are behaviors and actions we already have in place in our building. What maybe that's through the school improvement process. That's something you have to do regardless if you're going for STEM designation or not. So what are some procedures we already have in place? Because that's supposed to be a collaborative document. So how do we already have things in place where we're good at capturing evidence, where we can just replicate that and start using that to build our STEM journey, if that makes sense. So not recreating the wheel, but thinking about how, if our car has four wheels, how does each wheel do something a little bit different that helps us all get to the same destination. Next piece is a leadership team. I'll hush for a second so you can read that. I'll tell you one mistake I made when we were going through the designation process with this particular attribute, because you can learn from your mistakes, right? The important thing is you don't keep repeating them. We had our leadership team, and then we built a STEM leadership team. So we had two separate teams doing similar and different work. And that really kind of slowed our progress down a little bit, because the STEM leadership team were people just as passionate about the STEM work as I was, if not more. And then our core leadership team might have been a little more reserved on some aspects and some pieces. So it really kind of slowed us down. So over time, learning from that, even though we got designation, we worked through that. What we've done now is our core leadership team owns all these pieces. That way, they're really good at being able to go back with the grade level teams and show them how does this STEM piece relate to this requirement with the reading standard or this requirement with the math standard. It just really works really nice to show everybody how everything kind of meshes and melds together. There's a big fancy research-based word for that. I forget what it is sitting here, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But really just helping people understand that STEM is not a separate component to what we do. It kind of meshes and molds and melds with everything that goes on in the building. I think you can read that. I don't have to read that to you. I think the collaboration piece, though, you're seeing that repeated a lot in these slides, and that is important. It can't just be you or one or two of you driving the work. You've really got to work on how are you the biggest cheerleader, but how are you also empowering other people to be those cheerleaders as well. You'll see in a few slides, we'll talk about professional learning, professional development, things like that. And that's one really good way to build up that expertise throughout the building. But as we look at the rubric with the leadership team, again, you can see the 4 areas: early, developing, accomplishing, model. We want to focus on accomplishing and model because that's where we want our scores to be when we go through designation. You can see that the school leadership engages selected staff in action planning. School leadership has an articulated process for staff to give input and feedback for accomplishing. That could be something as simple as every time you have a school-wide PBL, you have some form of feedback from teachers and students, some type of little survey, something to let people know what worked, what didn't work, how do we feel. And you could, I said school-wide, you could funnel that down to an individual grade level. There's lots of different ways you could go towards things. Model those where I'd like to focus. You engage all staff. I think that's important to really focus on all staff. Even from the get-go when you're working on designation, really thinking about who's got it, who can run with it, and then how can they help me support the other people that are almost there, or how can they help me support the people that just don't get it, and either help them get on the same page or get out of the building. Also thinking about how you respond to feedback. That's another component of this. The evidence pieces. STEM is a culture, not a product. I think y'all have heard me kind of allude to that throughout this. It's a great quote though. But the evidence piece, a fully formed STEAM leadership team has led stakeholders in a collaborative design process to create a detailed STEM action plan grounded in research in which actions toward the Tennessee STEM and STEAM attributes are outlined. So again, thinking about how you're leading your people through those processes and connecting your people back to your plan. You heard me say earlier, this area, infrastructure, the people in the plan are the 2 most important components. If you don't have the people to help drive the plan and create it and make it a living document, it's really going to be hard to be successful with everything else in the process. It really is. Other pieces of evidence is your roster, your meeting agendas, and then being able to talk about it as the leader. How do you let staff participate collaboratively in making decisions, providing input, giving feedback, and then probably too, how do you respond to that? Either as a team or an individual leader, how do you respond to that feedback and input? There's an example of a leadership meeting template, leadership meeting agenda. You probably all have different agendas that fit your context. Again, I would not recommend that you try to change what you're already doing to fit examples that we share. 9 times out of 10, if you've got paper agendas, digital agendas, you're going to have the components you need for that evidence piece. Maybe adding in a STEM piece, if that's not something you're in the habit of looking at yet, that might be something to get in the habit of looking at. One thing that's important and crucial, you don't want, and again, you do not want the designation process to be a dog and pony show. When you have that site visit, when you're going through the interviews and having the conversations, if you're putting on a dog and pony show, it's going to show, because when the visitors start talking to teachers, start talking to students, they may not have a clue what's going on if it doesn't become a regular process of who you are. I can't stress enough that for me, I think it's crucial that you get in your head, getting designations, not a check mark on a box. It's a life-changing event for big people and little people. It's introducing kids and teachers to the work that's going to matter in their future. And it's showing them how they can use all those academics to really build and change the world. That's just me personally. Next piece is leadership professional development. If you want to take a minute and read that. This piece is important because it's where I talked about earlier, strategies you're putting in place to empower your people so they can empower other professionals that are helping you on this journey. You can see the rubric here. Again, we want to focus on accomplishing and model. For accomplishing, the school leadership team participates annually in a face-to-face and semi-annually in active online professional development sessions that address current STEM or STEAM education issues. And then for model, the school leadership team participates quarterly in face-to-face active online professional development sessions and networks with other STEM or STEAM school leaders to address current STEM or STEAM education issues. I would say a simple way to work on this, an easy way, TSIN, if you go to their website or you get their emails, they're always offering professional learning opportunities that are going to hit these areas that are going to be STEM related. Anytime I get something that they're offering, I shoot it out to the entire staff, and I encourage our entire staff to apply, because it's better to apply and be told, sorry, we don't have room, or sorry, you're not accepted, than just to sit on your butt and not even give it a shot. I try to model that work for the teachers here as well, and let them know what's going on. And so as a leader, I'm also always looking for opportunities where I can just participate in different professional learning that also would help support the staff. One thing we do here, we've been working with a guy named Eric Scheninger for the last 7 or 8 years. If you're not familiar with Eric's work, I would check him out. He's one of the leading scholars, I guess, with digital integration, how to use technology, but he's also really good with pedagogical practices. And so we do book studies here. We also have Eric come out and work in person with us. And so that's another example we can use, another piece of evidence we could use as a school with how I'm just not me growing as the leader, but also how I'm seeking out opportunities to grow the entire staff. So some other evidence pieces, you guys can read that screen if you want to. I think with professional development, what I would point out is that if you're stuck and you don't really know what to look for or what kind of things would help, you can always reach out to TSIN and just ask for help. And if they don't have something themselves, they're always good at providing resources and places to look. Here's an example of how you can catalog your evidence with professional development. You probably have something similar to this already. A lot of times school improvement plans are required to have these components. For this particular example, you can see in the far left corner the type of session, and then some details about it in the next column, the date, and then people in attendance. And those names are blacked out, but you could also have sign-in sheets and things like that to go with it. But I really think with this piece, with the professional development, as a leader, it's important you can articulate how this professional development is going to help your staff move forward with something related to the STEM work in your building. If you can't articulate that as the leader, then you probably need to rethink why you're doing the PD you're doing, just to be honest, because a lot of times I understand if there's district requirements and stuff like that, but if you're not doing something that's going to build up your organization wherever you're at in the journey, it may not be good use of your time or your people's time. And we don't want to waste people's time. All right, school environment as we keep right along. And again, I'll get to questions and stuff at the end of the presentation. I want to try to have 20 to 30 minutes for questions. So we're tracking right along pretty well for that. But with school environment, if you want to read that slide for a second. And you'll notice collaboration is showing up again. And that's important because I think part of a STEM culture is you don't see stuff in isolation. It either is going to transcend grade levels or work fluidly within grade levels for big people and little people both, right? For students and for adults. So looking at the rubric for the learning environment, for the school environment, there's a lot here, and we can look at accomplishing and model. But you'll notice right off the bat, classrooms are designed for collaborative work. They're going to be in every area. So just because you've pulled desks out of rows and put them into clusters, that doesn't mean you're going to hit model status on this rubric. So just kind of be aware of that. I think here when you see the additional spaces are identified for students to use for collaboration or work areas under the model, you've got to sometimes be creative with the areas that you've been given. I know for us here, we repurposed a random like trophy display area that didn't really make sense for elementary school. We repurposed that to our 3D printing station. So it's down towards the gym. It's kind of cool because it's a public area. So whatever 3D models that students are working on as kids are going to lunch or gym class or music, they can see those models as they're being printed in our 3D printer area. So that's kind of cool. It's a little bit of a hassle if stuff breaks down and stuff, but you got to be creative with what you got. But that is important. And that's a really good talking point, I think, that your leadership team can talk through as you're going through this process. Is collaboration happening everywhere in the building, but are we being as creative as we can with different places to really give students opportunities to take ownership of their learning? Down here at the bottom, a culture of inquiry and creativity exists among all teachers and administrators through implementation of 21st century learning skills in every class. I think the important thing there, when you think 21st century learning skills, there are some links embedded there. I'm not going to click on them because I'm scared I'll lose my slides and won't be able to get back. But if you go to those links, those are fine to use and will hit the expectation. But ensuring that language is consistent throughout your building is so important. And that's a big part of the job that your leadership team, your STEM leadership team is going to be doing. If you don't know, there's a lot of different models of 21st century learning out there. Even though the language is similar, you don't want different teams in your building speaking a different language as far as how it's tied back to different skills that kids are being exposed to. Virtual learning is used to connect students and teachers to bring in outside STEM or STEAM expertise or to exhibit student work. That's a really cool, and especially being post-pandemic and knowing all the different virtual tools and options we've got and how those things have been refined post-pandemic. Virtual field trips are really good. NASA's got some great ones if you're looking for things, if you don't have anything in your toolbox yet. But I also like this piece because it's how are you getting kids to connect from your school building to the outside world. That's a piece that's a little bit more challenging, at least at the elementary level, but it is doable. We've had some kids that have done presentations for other kids in other elementary classrooms all over the world. And that's really cool to see happen because the kids, it's interesting if you've never done that. Classroom locations facilitate the integration of STEM or STEAM content and teacher collaboration. So that collaboration piece is there again. I think I'll go on to the next slide. Some evidence things there. You can read that one. I think with this one, what I would draw your attention to is the third bullet, the second half of the third bullet. Students use the information they have learned and they demonstrate their mastery of content in the projects they work on. So when you think about your PBLs, your STEM projects, however your school ends up calling things, whoa, that jumped ahead, sorry. Really making sure that you can align the work back to the standards. The academic standards and how are kids showing their learning of academic standards in more creative ways. That's really what that bullet's getting to. And so how are you capturing evidence of those PBLs or other work that kids might be doing? This is just an example of some different ways that learning areas have been organized. These schools have done a good job here making STEM or STEAM mobile. So where kids can go check out stuff and bring it back to their regular classroom or maybe work on it in the hallway. And then this one, it looks like just an area that's set aside in a particular classroom or lab. There's no right or wrong way. I think that's something people also get caught up in is like, just show me what it looks like. Show me what it looks like. And I can show you what it looks like in our building, but it may not be able to look that way in your building because your building is physically structured differently than mine. Or you might have access to resources and tools that I don't have access to or vice versa. So what I like is pictures like this because it kind of gives you ideas. And it's like, well, could we do that in our building? Or is there a different way we could do that here? Or could we do something totally different? Or I think I could do that 10 times better. So that competitive piece can come in too. But these are all good ways to start Kickstarter conversations with your leadership team, regardless of where you're at in the journey. But again, these schools, I like the checkout piece there because that makes it accessible to everybody in the building without any excuse. All right, so the school schedule is the next thing we'll talk about. You can read that for a minute if you'd like. All right. So looking at school schedules in the rubric for accomplishing and model, we'll just go straight to model. The schedules allow for consistent teacher collaboration, co-teaching, and integration of subjects, and schedules allow ample time for projects, teacher planning, and non-traditional courses. That's a lot to think about, but it's a cool thing because you have the power to make the schedule what you want it to be in your building. So I know here what we did, we kind of moved from having our STEM work embedded all day to having a dedicated STEM time. And that helped some of the lower grades, kindergarten and first grade maybe. But then our upper grades, they preferred to have it more embedded because it became more of an organic piece that just kind of flowed in and out through math and reading. So you got to, again, know your building and work with your team, listen to that feedback and make those changes over time. Evidence for your schedule. That collaboration piece, do they have that time quarterly, monthly, weekly? How often do they get to meet collaboratively? Here in my school, teachers get to meet every day for 45 minutes, and it skipped again. Sorry about that. They get to meet every day for 45 minutes, common planning, where we can talk about lots and lots and lots of different things. Sometimes we do that together. Sometimes I'll leave them alone so they can do their work like they need to. But also your master schedule, either thinking about where your PLC time is, your collaborative time, different things like that. So this is just a sample of a school schedule. I'm sure everybody's got a school schedule and probably everybody's got collaborative pieces of planning time built in there, I would bet. But yeah. Right. And so the thing here is talking about that A in STEM, at making it STEAM. So you've got an option now where you can just do STEM designation or do STEAM designation. So the STEAM piece is going to be the arts. And you can see here, there's additional artifacts and evidence. You can read that. I don't have to read it to you, but basically, you know, as a building level leader, if you're going for STEAM or STEM, and if you're going for STEAM, you just have to make sure that you've got those additional factors in there. The arts instruction, making sure that those fine arts people are part of your professional team, part of your leadership team, that they have input into what you're doing. It's not just this isolated thing out there. So that's the end of it. So that gives us about 30 minutes for questions and answers. And so I think the easiest way to do this will just be if you want to raise your hand. If you have a question, I will try to call on you and we can just have some conversation. And if nobody has questions, I guess I did a good job. I think you guys can raise your hands. So let's see. I don't, it's showing up as JASKEW. I don't
Yes.
know what.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Yes, it's Joanne Askew. I'm from Clarksville Academy.
Hey, Joanne.
I would like to ask a question with regard to evidence. Some of the things you showed, like the mobile STEM lab where you checked things out, or the work in progress that looked like maybe a marble run that the kids were working on right there.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's that evidence example. Photos are fine for evidence example, where the difficulty I'm having is collecting lesson plans that are, just words instead of something like this, which really indicates what they're doing. So as part of the evidence, can we say see photos?
Well, what I would recommend there, and Kristen, you jump in here if I'm speaking out of turn. Kristen McQueen's on here. She's with TSIN. I'm kind of a quote unquote expert in the field. So I'll tell you my opinion on that. I'll tell you what we did when we went through designation. We wear Twitter out here. Okay. So we're a Twitter school. And so teachers here wear it out. Our hashtag is hashtag buzzworthy, capital B, capital W. And so the reason we do that is because if you know anything about hashtags, when you click on them, it takes you to a historical, I don't know what the word is. It shows you all the historical narrative of those photos, of those tweets for Twitter in particular. And so what we did, we were able to pull 2 years worth of photos off of Twitter and tie those back to different areas on the rubric as part of our evidence. There was narrative that accompanied those photos, but for us here in our building, the word lesson plan is a dirty word. I don't require lesson plans here. Our teachers, we've got, and of course we're a little bit further along, but we've got a very organic process here where we've got 4 cornerstones that are going to be the supports of our STEM work. Our engineering design process is one of those. Our PBL lessons are one of those. School-wide transformations is the other. And then how we utilize the collaboration and teamwork rubrics throughout the building. Those are our 4 cornerstone pieces. But to answer your question, I don't think there's a problem if you have the photos. I think what backs that up, though, is if I submit photos, you want to have a very robust narrative that describes the photo. And then what's kind of the icing on the cake is when you have your site visit, you actually see those photos in action. So that way, if that, like that little mobile STEM cart or STEAM cart, I could submit a photo of that. But when I come visit your school, if it's covered in dust, it's probably not being used. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of making sure, how do you use those photos to help tell your story? But then how is that going to be sweetened in real time when people are on your campus seeing those things being used? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I've got some more hands and you can.
I'm going to jump in real quick just on that one question. There was also one in the chat about artifacts. So we'll just go ahead and address artifacts as a whole really quick. So when we think about artifacts can be lots of different things. It can be photos, it can be videos, it can be lesson plans, it can be PowerPoints, it could be Canva, it can be student created designs. So when you think about evidence, it really is an endless amount of opportunities for you to showcase there. When we think about how much evidence or artifacts to submit, the application itself will ask you to submit 1 to 3 pieces of evidence per attribute. I have seen schools submit 1 piece of artifact, and I've seen schools submit 20 pieces of artifact per attribute. It is truly what your school feels like the attribute hits the nail on the head. So really, you want to be able to showcase, and with no doubt in your mind, that all of this evidence or this piece of evidence showcases that attribute. So again, the application will ask you to submit 1 to 3 pieces of evidence. You are free to upload more. And again, evidence can be pictures, it can be PDFs, it can be PowerPoints, it can be lesson plans. The amount of evidence list is kind of endless there. So just wanted to address the artifact piece.
Thank you.
Renee, I saw your hand next. If you want to go, you can unmute yourself, Renee. Renee Meeks. Can you unmute yourself, Renee, if you still have a question?
Hello, I was in a meeting. Hello, everyone. My question was in STEAM. So what if we say, okay, we want to add the A, but then we don't meet all the criteria for that. Does that automatically knock you out for STEM?
So you're kind of cutting in and out, but I think
I'll address that question, Dr. Ford, real quick, if you don't mind. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
pretty sure
fine.
the question that she asked was if her school applied to be a STEAM school, but not all of the attributes in the A were met. Here's the thing: if you look at our rubric, if you are choosing to go down the STEM pathway, the arts are integrated into every single attribute. You have to earn 90% in the model status throughout the entire rubric to earn designation. So therefore, if we don't hit 90% in those designations, then we will not be able to grant designation to that school. The arts are embedded into those particular attributes. So it's not necessarily a separate piece, and whether we're seeing the arts or not, we provide.
I need how to do it. You got the link. What is it? That's all.
On our rubric at the bottom of each attribute, we do provide some characteristics to describe to schools what the arts could look like. So make sure that if you're in middle school, elementary school, high school, and you're curious about what those characteristics and those attributes look like to truly embed the arts into your particular grade band, that you take a peek into the rubric for that.
Michelle Phipps, I see you next, I think.
Yes. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm battling sickness this evening.
I understand. I just got over that myself. I can hear you though.
Okay, good. Kristen was kind of speaking to what my question was. I think I have a pretty good grasp of STEM in the high school level. I think I kind of see what that looks like and kind of have a vision for that. My question was, I guess I was just going to ask if you could speak to what the arts might look like in high school and how I could incorporate that. I don't really understand how to incorporate that, I think.
Okay. Kristen, do you want to speak to that one or do you want me to give it a shot?
Why don't you go first and then I'll tag team.
Okay. I think, Michelle, maybe could you tell me a little bit more about your high school? What kind of, maybe we call them specialty classes in elementary, but like I don't know what things you offer to kids outside of the academics. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. We are a pretty heavily concentrated CTE school. We have an awful lot of CTE, and that's a major focus of our high school. We're a very rural public high school. And so we don't have a lot of fine arts. We have like visual art and choir, and we don't have a band or anything like that. We do have like some instrument classes, piano and stuff like that. But I just have been trying to wrap my mind around the role that the fine arts could take in our STEM. And I would really like to incorporate it, although we have said we're going for a STEM designation. I'm really interested in incorporating that art, but I personally just don't know what that looks like. And she did say I could go and look on the website, and I have not done that. So there may be things there that would help me see that also.
So you got my wheels turning. So being heavily CTE concentrated, what are some of the CTE offerings you guys have?
Okay, so we have like culinary and nursing programs. We've got stuff like that. Next year we'll be opening a slaughterhouse on our campus, and so we've got turf management and we've got several things, but that really has been a focus of our school.
Do you have anything related to coding or 3D printing or anything like that?
We have nothing in that area.
Okay.
And we desire to incorporate that, but at this point, we don't have anything or anybody to teach it.
Okay, so one way, and Kristen, you may have to help me with this, but one thing I could think of just off the cuff when you're thinking about that collaboration piece, because you want the arts to be pulled in for that STEAM designation. It's your total campus model. So for high schools, I've got a background in high school. I've got high school, middle school, elementary school experience, but my background with high school, I know how notorious they can be, where you've got your English department, you've got your history department, and everybody kind of does their own thing and leave me alone. But building that collaborative campus together, one thing you might think about is if you've got a PBL design process, if you've got a way that your school approaches PBL lessons, whether that's problem-based or project-based, maybe think about, I heard you say you have a chorus and you've got a nursing program. So maybe your nursing program needs help from the chorus in figuring out how could we do something, how could we create some type of musical program that could help ease some of the pain that patients are feeling or some of the stress that patients are feeling, and then how can that be tied to some type of academic standard, and then capturing that in evidence. That might be a way you're pulling your fine arts in. It does sound like you're pretty limited, but that's just one example. If that kind of helps get your wheels going, any that I could think of. Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, so those are all great examples. If you're just thinking about embedding that A into STEAM, one of the things that I would recommend you doing is to go ahead and pull the art standards and really familiarize yourself with those. A lot of us will find that we can easily implement art standards into a lot of our PBLs that we're creating because it just lends itself so naturally. So familiarizing yourself with those standards. A lot of the time, the gap is that we're not familiar with those because we may be a subject area teacher. Another piece of advice, if you are interested in incorporating that A, is to pull someone from your fine arts area onto your STEM leadership team. Getting someone who is an expert in that type of content and that type of knowledge, and it is very well versed in those standards, getting them and pulling them onto the leadership team can also help elevate those things. So those are just a couple pieces of advice there.
Thank you, guys. You already have my wheels turning. I appreciate that.
That's great. That's what this is about. Tanya, I see your hand.
Yes, just two things that you mentioned that I just didn't hear you clearly. I believe you were talking about a book study. I believe you said school-wide kindergarten. Is that correct?
Lifelong kindergarten.
Lifelong kindergarten. Okay. And then you also mentioned someone named Eric that you said could be a resource.
Eric Scheninger. His last name is Scheninger. Let me put it in the chat.
Okay.
It's kind of
hard. And those
to...
are my only questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So we had one question in the chat that I wanted to throw out to you, Dr. Ford.
Okay.
Can you speak to multidisciplinary PBLs, or do you do quarterly PBLs, or do you do one per semester? What does your PBL frequency look like?
For us personally, we try to have one big one each quarter. Being elementary school, we feel like that's more manageable. We've got one coming up. We're dealing with some tulips and stuff like that. So grade levels, there are some grade levels that'll do smaller PBLs separately that'll be a little bit more frequently. But as far as like a school-wide impact, we do that once a quarter. That just works for us. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. You heard me say earlier that STEM, there's no packaged product. This is STEM. I can go buy it. It's going to look totally different in every context. Right. I don't know if there's any other questions. I don't see anybody else using the hand raise function. We can wait a minute and see because we got a little bit of time left. Nothing else in the chat. I got excited and talked too fast.
Excuse me, someone, this is Dr. Harris from Oakshire. I wanted to hear that question that you just answered about the PBLs. Could you please repeat it? Someone walked in and was asking me something. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. That's no problem. I said that for our school, it works well to just do it once a quarter. So every 9 weeks, we have a school-wide PBL that everybody participates in. Sometimes those relate to our school gardens that we have. We've got a pretty robust green team here with school-wide gardens and a greenhouse and stuff. Other grade levels, like our older kids in 3rd and 4th grade, sometimes will have PBLs more frequently. They might do 2 to 3 a quarter. But as far as I don't want to say required, but as far as like a required school-wide PBL that all kids K4 participate in, those happen once a quarter.
And I think too that you'll find, Dr. Ford is speaking to, PBL isn't a one size fits all type deal. You really have to get into a groove of what works well in your school. Our school-wide PBL is something that your grade bands are capable of doing. If not, do you have grade level PBLs that feel better for your culture and being able to ease into. And when we think about 2.1 is the frequency of PBL. So how often PBLs are happening in your building, and really thinking about how often students are involved in a project or problem-based learning experience. So that's really what you want to think about when it comes to thinking about 2.1. How often are students engaged in a PBL?
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, because we went through this process several years ago. And so where we're at now is not who we were several years ago. And sometimes I forget that. So I apologize there. When we first started out with the PBL journey, every grade level wasn't even ready. Our younger kids, kindergarten was really our most resistant group, just because you had to get the adults to the point where they felt like the kids could do it. The kids were ready to run. The teachers just weren't comfortable with it. And sometimes that happens. But that frequency piece will change. And it still, even though we have common ones, like I said, it looks a little bit different per grade level as far as the frequency.
Well, and that leads us into our next question really nicely. Dr. Ford, speak to a little bit about how you have prepared your teachers to design and build out PBLs. What type of PD did you make sure that your teachers had as you all were kind of moving into this cultural shift?
Yeah, I think just beyond the PBL piece, but just the entire STEM journey, for us, it's important. My frequency in classrooms, how often do my teachers see me in their classroom, giving authentic feedback that's not associated to the official evaluation. I think that's been the most important thing as far as a coaching or professional development part goes. If I'm not in the classrooms, I can't give feedback. I can't help people feel like if they're moving in the right direction or not, if that makes sense. We have a pretty robust informal feedback structure here. I'm in classrooms just about every week. I'm in every classroom, and we have 640 students. I have 32 academic classrooms. So I'm seeing those teachers weekly in an informal capacity. And that goes a really long way. As far as like resources and things, it's been a lot of me saying yes and not saying no. And then really the training and stuff has not necessarily been PBL related. Like we've not had a PBL expert come in and train our staff. Really, it's just been encouraging the teachers to be creative, to think about the standards, the academic standards, and how can those be exposed to the kids. But then when we give them that opportunity to apply their learning, how are we being creative in the opportunities we give them to apply that learning? That's really what's resonated the most with us. I mentioned Eric earlier. He's the professional learning piece that helped us more than anything in our journey. Again, he moves beyond the digital. He gets pegged as the digital guy, the digital literacy, the digital integration, the computer, the tech guy. That's what he gets pegged as. But Eric's got a really robust knowledge of pedagogical strategy. If you're familiar with Bill Daggett's work, the rigor relevance framework and things like that, the different quadrants, Eric kind of works with that as well, but it kind of takes it a step further with thinking about student voice and student choice and student ownership in lessons. So I don't know if I'm answering that question very well, but we never had a traveling salesman, so to speak, come in and teach us how to do PBL. There's resources out there, and I'm not knocking them, but really what I did as the building level leader, I chose to empower the talent we had in the building. So really looking at teachers and listening and understanding what they wanted to do, we adopted the acronym FAIL. It's a fail-safe culture. So first attempt in learning, FAIL stands for first attempt in learning, and really supporting that, not beating teachers up when those first time projects, second time, sometimes fourth time projects fail, but how do we learn from it and how do we keep moving forward? And then really kind of, because you got to think about state testing and all that stuff, whatever your opinion is, but thinking about how do we make sure those academic standards start coming up under these really cool projects and supporting the kids' learning. So that was a lot. I didn't mean to verbally throw up on y'all, but hopefully I answered that some.
Maureen, I think we've got one last question.
It's actually not a question. That previous question made me think of something that we did that I found really helpful that I thought I would share. At one of our PDs with our teachers on PBLs, the TSIN templates that are available for the PBL planning, having that available and having them bring their standards and work cross-curricular. I kind of introduced it as like a Freyer model and put like the PBL topic in the middle, and then each content area had to fill the boxes out of the Freyer model. And then they took that and they dug deeper using the TSIN template to really show how they were kind of being cross-curricular and interdisciplinary with the creation of the PBL, the presentation, the community partnerships, and such. So it just was something that I think the light bulb went on for many teachers, and I thought I'd share it to help someone else.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, our PBL resources are definitely on our website. We have its very own designation page, and we just revamped it. So make sure that you go and check that out. Dr. Ford, if you'll go back to the slide that has your contact information on it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to really share about your experience, as a principal of a designated school. And Dr. Ford is also going to be leading out the rest of our webinar series. So we're really excited to have just his expertise and his, boots on the ground knowledge of being able to lead a school to success with this. Our next webinar will be attribute number 2, and we'll be diving into curriculum and instruction. And curriculum instruction does have the most sub attributes. Notice that we're going to go from 2.1 all the way down to 2.7. So definitely the meat of the application, as far as it's the biggest portion of the application. So make sure that you join us on, do you remember, Dr. Ford?
It's Wednesday.
No.
This
Wednesday.
Yep. This Wednesday will be our next session. It's actually back here somewhere.
So this Wednesday, same time, we will record. All of these will end up on our designation website. So we actually have a YouTube playlist. So any meetings that we have about our attributes will be uploaded to our YouTube page. So you are welcome to snag and share them with your leadership team. So I'll put the link to the website that you need to get there. We'll dive into curriculum instruction on Wednesday from 3:30 to 4:30 Central Time. We appreciate your time. Dr. Ford and I'll hang out for just a few more minutes, but otherwise, thank you so much for your time. We hope that you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, guys.